Here's a question I want you to sit with for just a second. If the market dropped 20% right now today and stayed down for 18 months, would your retirement plan survive it? Not would you be okay eventually. I mean, would your income still show up every single month, and would you be able to not touch your investments during the downturn? That's not a hypothetical. That's the situation Robert and Linda were staring at when they first walked into our office. And today I'm going to walk you through exactly what we found and what we built together. I'm Jose Martin with Lifecraft Wealth Management. This is Real Talk, where we tell real retirement stories. Robert was 61, Linda was 59, and Robert had spent his career in logistics management. Steady work, good income, 401k that he'd been faithfully maxing out since 1997. Linda had worked part-time for years while raising their kids, and she'd gone back full-time in her early 50s. She had her own retirement account, not as large as Robert's, but growing. And together they had right around $1.8 million in investable assets. Their home was paid off, kids were through college. On paper, they were in great shape. And they felt like they were in great shape. Robert was planning to retire in about 18 months, and Linda wanted to follow him out the door maybe a year after that. But here's what brought them to us. Robert had been reading a lot, and he'd been watching the headlines, and something was nagging at him that he couldn't quite name. He said to me, and I won't forget this, he said, "Jose, I don't know if we're ready or if we just feel ready, and I don't know how to tell the difference." That's one of the most honest things a client has ever said to me in a first meeting, and it told me everything I needed to know about Robert. So we sat down, we went through everything, and what we found is that Robert and Linda had done a lot of things right. They'd saved consistently, they had low debt, and they had a solid nest egg. But there was a gap in their plan, a specific one. And it's one I see constantly with pre-retirees who've done everything else right. And here's the gap. Robert was planning to retire and immediately start pulling income from his investment portfolio. And that sounds completely normal. That's what most people assume retirement looks like. But here's the problem. When you're still working and the market drops, you don't sell anything. You ride it out. You might even buy more at lower prices. The downturn actually works in your favor. But the moment you retire and start taking withdrawals, well, the math flips completely. Now when the market drops, you're forced to sell shares to fund your monthly income. You're selling low. And those shares you hold, they're gone. They can't participate in the recovery. This is called sequence of returns risk, and there's a specific window. Financial researchers call it the fragile decade. It's the 5 years before retirement and the 5 years after, where a bad sequence of returns can do permanent damage to a portfolio. Robert and Linda were sitting right in the middle of that fragile decade. With $1.8 million and a plan to start pulling $8,000 a month in 18 months and no buffer between them and the market, they were exposed. At Lifecraft, we use a framework called Wealth M.A.P, M-A-P, your means, your aspirations, and your protection. And when all three pillars are properly coordinated, you have the best possible outlook for retirement. For Robert and Linda, means and aspirations were in decent shape. They had enough assets, they had a clear picture of the retirement they wanted, travel, time with grandkids eventually, and keeping their lifestyle without feeling like they were watching every dollar. But protection, there was a gap. Protection, in our framework, covers everything that can erode your retirement security from the outside and the inside. Market volatility, inflation, healthcare costs, longevity risk, and specifically for Robert and Linda right now, sequence of returns risk. This fix wasn't complicated, but it required intention. Here's what we built together. First, we established a cash reserve, 6 months of income needs sitting in liquid accounts completely separate from the investment portfolio. Now, you might be thinking 6 months sounds lean, and you've probably read that most advisors recommend 1 to 2 years in cash. Here's why we do it differently. The reason most advisors build a large cash buffer is to protect against having to sell investments at a loss during a prolonged downturn. We agree with the problem, we just solve it differently, at the portfolio level rather than the cash level. Second, we rebuilt the portfolio itself using what we call the all-weather portfolio design. Robert's investments were heavily growth-oriented, which made total sense during the accumulation years. But as we moved into the distribution phase, we rebuilt the allocation specifically to absorb the kind of volatility that forces other retirees to sell shares at exactly the wrong time. The all-weather design is built to mitigate large drawdowns, not eliminate them, but meaningfully reduce them. So when markets do correct, the portfolio isn't dropping 30 or 40%. 6 months of cash is enough of a runway because we're not waiting 18 months for a devastated portfolio to recover. We're designed to weather the storm, not just survive it. And that's the philosophy, designed to weather weeks like this, not avoid them entirely. Third, we mapped out Robert's Social Security decision. He'd been planning to claim at 62, and we modeled out what claiming at 67 or even 70 would look like. And the income difference was substantial. Delaying Social Security gave us a powerful income anchor that reduced how much pressure we were putting on the portfolio every single month. Robert retired 8 months after that first meeting, not the 18 months he'd originally planned earlier. And because once the plan was built and the income was mapped out clearly, he could see that there was a buffer between him and the next market correction. He was ready. Linda followed him about 14 months later. And I'll tell you what Robert said when we met after he'd been retired for about 6 months. He said, "I don't even check the market anymore. I used to check it every morning with my coffee. Now I drink the coffee and I call my daughter." That's it. That's the goal. Not just financial security. The freedom to stop living in the fear of the next headline. The protection pillar of Wealth M.A.P isn't just about preventing loss. It's about creating the confidence to actually live your retirement without one eye always on the screen. What Robert and Linda were walking into is a very, very real pattern that I've seen repeatedly throughout the years. People who have done everything right, saved diligently, invested consistently, but who are walking into a retirement without a coordinated income plan, without a buffer, and without a strategy that accounts for the order of their returns, not just the average. If you're in your late 50s or early 60s and you want some clarity on what your retirement income strategy needs to look like, reach out to us. That's the conversation I want to have with you. Not a pitch, not a sales call, a genuine complimentary 30-minute conversation. We'll talk through your situation and you'll leave with clarity whether you work with us or not. I'm Jose Martin, proud founder of Lifecraft Wealth Management. Let's have a conversation.